Should I start making tea?
I usually do some like a prep before your concert.
Not really, to be honest. I do like a little bit of a vocal warm-up. That's kind of my biggest thing. I guess I do. I guess I shouldn't say no. I do a small bit of prep. I warm up my voice. I warm up my hands for playing guitar. Most of it is just me trying to not be nervous and trying to like calm down and just like have fun. So I feel like before shows, I just relax, steam my voice maybe, that's about it. Nothing too crazy. I started when I was 8 years old at a music school, like after school, like an after school program type of thing. But I stopped when I was probably like 15. And then I've just been kind of teaching myself, practicing kind of throughout the years. Most of it is self-taught, I think, after that. Yeah. I think in the overall industry, there's still a lot that needs to be done. I think it's definitely getting better. I mean, queer artists are a lot more mainstream, which is great. I think trans artists specifically is still kind of newer to the conversation, trans people in general. So, you know, I think there's always more that can happen. I think there definitely needs to be a lot more representation across genres as well. I feel like a lot of queer people in the music industry get like it's all pop music or like dance music, things that are like traditionally seen as like gay music or queer music. But like, you know, there's so many like trans, queer, like hardcore bands, punk singers, death metal singers, hip hop artists, like all that kind of stuff that we don't really get to see a lot of. So I'd love to see that. And in the local scene, I don't know, I think it's the same. I think it's pretty good in Toronto. That could just be that I surround myself with a lot of queer people, so it feels like there's a lot of us in the scene. But I think specifically in the like punk kind of alt music scene in Toronto, it's really queer dominant, and there's a lot of venues and spaces that, you know, need to be better and are not as friendly to the queer community. But in terms of the artists and the people that are creating here, there's a lot. It's just getting to bigger platforms is kind of hard. I mean, yeah, I guess in my experience, it's more just general life stuff. Like it's not even related to the music industry. When I'm with, like when we play shows, most of our audience is queer. Everyone coming to our show certainly knows that we're queer and we are very outspoken about it. If we're playing at a venue, then that venue obviously knows who we are and we're choosing to work with them. But it's encountering a lot of like older musicians, maybe like, you know, the more business side of the music industry where there's just like misgendering and transphobia, but a lot of that is just the transphobia that I experience in the everyday, going to my day job or taking transit or, you know, whatever. I don't think it's necessarily specific to the music industry. At least in my experience, this industry has been really good to me. Shout about it a lot. Pretty much everything I write is about me and my journey being queer, growing up super religious and kind of coming out of that. And so it's just being really unapologetic with the things I write. But a big part of it for me is just our live performances. Like when I'm on stage, I pretty much exclusively wear skirts and crop tops and lots of makeup and fishnets, and I'm very outspoken about it on stage, as well as in my music. And I think I think being on stage, I don't know, there's something about walking into a room, seeing a band and seeing like a very visible trans person on stage, which is really cool. It's something I've experienced a lot, and I hope that people that come to our shows get to experience that too. But yeah, just like painful honesty, I guess, is kind of the answer. So I am a pastor's kid. I was raised very Christian. I am half Chinese and half African, and there's a lot of culture, religious culture, generational trauma that goes into that, and a lot of that was kind of compounded in this like sort of Black Christian identity that I got from my father. And I was super into it for a long time. I was a worship leader, and I wanted to go to Bible college, and I was like I worked really hard to be a good Christian boy. I'm like, a good pastor's son. But was very miserable throughout all of it and never felt like myself. And it wasn't until moving away from home and meeting other queer people and like seeing the different ways you can live that like, that helped me. And so I hold a lot of, I guess, trauma from that, or, it influenced a lot of my life. It was probably up until I was in my 20s. And so a lot of the music I write is sort of just trying to figure out what life means without this sort of very strict gender binary or like religious cage. Like, what do you do when you have the freedom to explore anything, right? It can be so daunting. So yeah, that's a lot of what I write about and what fuels a lot of my music, I think.
Thanks. I would just say it from I'm really sorry for that.
Thank you. It's okay.
It's just a bit too much, probably. Yeah, I think it's really cool to talk about it, honestly, if you have it. I think you need to have a lot of strength to talk about it.
Thanks.
It's kind of a really hard topic.
Yeah, I'm a pretty open book as a person. I don't really hide a lot. Don't really feel the need to. And like, it's one of those things, I think, when it comes to performance, like I was saying, being on stage and kind of making a big spectacle of myself. One, I'm a very extroverted person. I like having fun. I like being a bit of a spectacle, but I also never got to see anyone like me growing up. I never saw people that were half Black and half Chinese. I was around very few mixed people. And then having an extreme religious upbringing, coming out of that, being trans, I don't know, it's hard and it sucked for sure, and it does suck sometimes, but what's the point in being here if not to help someone else that could be in that situation, So I don't know, I just like to be honest about it. Maybe someone else can, I don't know, it's that cliche thing, maybe someone can see themselves in me or in our music or something, but there's a truth to it. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. My biggest inspiration that I'd have to shout out first, I have a tattoo of her band on my arm, is Laura Jane Grace from Against Me. Just her whole story of, being a pretty big, successful punk band in the mainstream media, coming out in Rolling Stone, writing an album called Transgender Dysphoria Blues that talks all about it. I love her music already and was already a fan of her music, but that really just solidified that you can be trans in whatever way that means to you. Like if you're a trans woman, you don't have to then be a super hyper, everything's pink and frilly and femme and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I love that stuff, don't get me wrong, but you can be yourself. The fact that her voice is the same when she sings, I love that. I do that. I like that with my voice. I have a low voice, but I like my voice, And I don't have to change it to make it more palatable for someone else to justify my transness. It was actually during the pandemic, I finally got her book and read her book, and that's what really like gave me the push to kind of come out and face all of that sort of my internal transphobias and kind of process all that myself, and which helped me get to where I am today. So she's definitely one of my biggest musical influences, one of my biggest life influences. When I was younger, when I first started playing guitar, I got into punk music right away. That's what got me into guitar. Was Jane County back in like the 70s, coming out as a trans woman fronting a punk band and still making music today. She's just like the coolest and a badass. Honestly, those are probably my two biggest ones. I have a lot of musical influences that are not necessarily queer, but I think in terms of being inspired by queerness, I take more inspiration from like my friends and the community that I've surrounded myself with, not having that growing up. I think for me, there's something about seeing something like someone being visibly trans, just like going to work, going to get a Starbucks coffee, that feels so like, it feels bigger to me than being on a public stage or platform. And I don't know that I can explain why, but yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but those are my influences, I guess. It's been surprisingly good. And again, like we try to surround ourselves with like-minded people and other queer musicians and stuff, but I guess the way I always say it is like, so I studied, we were talking about this earlier, I studied musical theater and acting, and musical theater is predominantly, stereotypically a lot of gay men, and, is supposed to be a very queer-friendly industry, and it's really not. It was a horrible industry, and I spent probably 5-6 years in it, and I hated it. I was, forced to be the very like picturesque man if I wanted to get a role, super racist, and unless you're a cis white gay man, you don't belong, or you're a cis white hetero woman. There's no space for anything else. And so I lived in this world for a long time that I thought was inclusive, and telling myself was inclusive. Well, I think I deep down knew it wasn't. And then when I got into the punk scene, it was kind of the opposite, where everyone's like, well, punk is predominantly like cis white men, and there's like skinhead punks and Nazi punks, and there's all this stuff and all these like, aggressive men in it, which sure is true. There is a portion of that, and punk has been dominated by white cis men in the past, little while. But I started playing music, and to this day, I have never had another band or like anyone do anything malicious to me, never not make me feel accepted. I remember the first show we did that was with bands that we didn't know. They were all cis, hetero bands. They were all a lot older than we were. And I was nervous, I have a rant about trans rights in my show. I yell fuck TERFs a lot. I'm very outspoken about it, and I wasn't sure how the audience would react. And so we did the show, and it was good. And one of the bands that I was kind of nervous about came up to me after the words, and he was like, hey, I just want you to know, like, loved your set. You guys are awesome. Also, gave me a high five, and he was like, you're the fucking most badass person in this room. Being trans, having the strength to be yourself is one of the hardest things you can do. And the fact that you're doing it on stage is an amazing thing, and never let anyone stop that. And it was so cool, I got super emotional. And honestly, that's kind of been my experience in the industry, whereas a lot of people have just been accepting. And I think in Toronto, there's a big group of people that still hold like what I call like the true values of punk music, that it's for everyone. It's for you to be yourself. It's for self-acceptance. It's for, going against the grain, being kind of weird, being different. And it's a place to celebrate all that. And I think Toronto, yeah, like I said, there's always room to grow, but I think there was a big portion of it that is really holding on to that. I like hate answering this question because it makes me feel, I'm not a person that's great at like talking about my achievements and stuff and myself, but like, yeah, kind of. I think for the first time in my life, I'm like, people actually like what I do and people are like picking up on it, and it's really cool. I remember the very first show we did, we played a set. I had a couple friends in the audience, but that was it. No one knew who we were, brand new. And these two people who I didn't know came up to me afterwards, and they were both trans people of color. And I'll never forget the interaction, and I think it's gonna make me emotional thinking about it, but they were like, hey, we just wanted to let you know that we absolutely loved your set. It was really cool. And they were like, we don't really feel safe in these spaces a lot of the time as trans mask people, as people of color. We've never seen anyone be so outspoken about it on stage who's a person of color and trans, and it just made us feel really safe. And they just like thanked me for that, which was really cool. And then, I was like, gave up a bit. I was like, can I hug you? That's so sweet. Like I will never forget that moment. It was one of the best things I think that's ever happened to me. And then we did a show at the Hard Luck not too long ago where we opened for Pink Shift, and a lot of their fans are younger, kind of like, 18 to 21. And a lot of them after the set, they wanted like our set list, they asked for autographs, and it was just like a lineup of trans people, queer people, gender variant people just telling us like how much they appreciated it and how much it means to them. And people have reached out to us on Instagram and stuff about that. And I've had a lot of specifically young people be like, you guys are my new favorite band because I've never heard someone talk about it like this. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's an influence or if it's just, providing space for them to feel or whatever, but I don't know, maybe young people think I'm cool. Like that's it, that's kind of cool. It's like everything I want from playing music, and to see it happening is very surreal. Yeah, I mean, I definitely exists in the music industry. I think it exists in all industries. I think it's something that I've actually tried to, like, I don't know how to say, avoid is maybe not the right word, but I've tried to take a step back from calling out. Obviously, if it's something like, Target's Pride collection, things like that, like there's some pretty clear examples, but I think when it comes to specifically artists, I don't know the artist personally. I don't know much about the artist. I don't think I have a right to say what's a gimmick and what's not, and I think sometimes, even within the community, we can do that to each other and label something as a gimmick or a trope or not genuine, when a lot of times I think it is. And I think it's not fair to discredit someone's queerness. Unless you know for sure, like if I know the artist personally, I know they're not queer and they're pretending to be queer, or, it's kind of evident that they're doing something. Like I think, I don't know, we all have that intuition when there are times when it's real, but I know myself, this is something I used to do a lot. I think that's why I'm stepping back from it, is where there'd be like a queer artist or even with female artists that are loud and outspoken, and I'd catch myself being like, yeah, but it's just too loud, or like, I don't know, I don't really like what she's doing, or it's too much, or she's just trying to be this, or they're just trying to be this, and it got to the point where I'm like, what is that though? Like, that's so not supportive. I have no idea what this person is like. I have no idea who this person is. Who am I to say what their queerness is, what's genuine? Some people are loud and outspoken and flamboyant, and some people are not, but that doesn't make one a gimmick versus another one. I also think, you know, sometimes it's okay to capitalize on yourself. And I say that, again, as a trans woman, a mixed race woman, you know, it's a lot of corporations and people are looking for people like me so they don't seem racist, to hire people like us, to diversify their staffs, to do things like that. And like, fuck it, I'll take your money. Like, you know, it's been the thing working against me for so long. Yeah, I'll use it to make money. Why not? Like, I have to make money to survive. That's the world we live in. I think maybe the time it becomes gimmicky is when it's not being paid back to the community in any way. But even then, I think it can just get it's really nuanced most of the time. So I think it exists. I just don't maybe know that I'm a person that's allowed to speak on it yet. I think, like everything, it's getting better. Maybe that's the like political answer to say. I mean, there are more, like with CBC and stuff, there are more queer voices being heard, and queer shows coming out, which is great. I think it always has a long way to go. I think, what do I think? I think it's one of those things where the issue is when we see a lot of queer representation, it's a very specific type of queer person or a very specific type of thing that like, that's at the forefront, you know? So kind of like I was saying where, you know, people are hiring people that are like me now because it diversifies their staff or it makes them look not racist and stuff. You know, people use these queer shows and stuff like that for a lot of or queer characters or things to like tick boxes. You know, if we have a Black, lesbian, non-binary person, that's one actor we can hire. Now we can just have the rest can be white and we can keep doing what we're doing. I think the fact that we're starting to see more stuff that are actually written by queer people is amazing. But I think there's just like such a long way to go. I think maybe my thing with the industry here, the industry in Canada as a whole, is that Canadians love to think that we are the good guys, that we're not as bad as the States, and gay marriage has been legal here longer. And even a lot of Canadians being like, well, Canadians never really owned slaves and stuff like that. And it's like, all of those things are so painfully wrong. And because a lot of, I think Canada's complex as a whole doesn't like to look at issues like that, it's really hard to then make headway in getting better at those things. So from where I stand, I think it's getting there. I think things are definitely different than when I was growing up, and that's really cool, but it still feels like a very grassroots fight that's happening right now. Like it's not where it needs to be. I think one of the biggest things we need is space. Just venues that, across the board, treat artists with respect, that we're providing a service, that we're valued. You know, I want to get paid in money. I don't want to get paid in drinks. I want to get paid for doing what I do. But having venues that like can support the queer community, that can support our music and support our art, having funding like for us. There's just not a lot of resources and opportunity for it. And I think that's the hardest thing. You know, I know a lot of bands that are queer and not queer, but especially queer bands. It's really hard to get grant funding. It's really hard to get label recognition. It's really hard to get venues sometimes to put on your events that you want to market as queer events, as a queer safe space, as a pride show, as a thing like that. Or they want to market it, and this is where that kind of gimmicky thing comes in, maybe, or the rainbow washing, where they want to market it for a pride event, but that venue is famously homophobic and their bartenders are transphobic and, you know, that sort of thing. I think, yeah, just like having space and resources is a huge thing lacking. And I know I've spoken to a lot of my friends' bands and my friends that are queer musicians and stuff, and it feels like we're all spread out. It feels like you're a queer musician who doesn't know another one, who doesn't know another one, and it's hard to find each other, and it's hard to, you know, find space to rehearse, and it's hard to find space for, like, you know, all of those kinds of things. And it just feels like there's a lot of barriers, so things to help get over that, you know?
I know that, like, from the music industry, or from the, film industry, like, everyone has their own unions, like camera, grips, whatever. Maybe music industry, you have something like that, like union,
Yeah.
like queer artists, or like a safe, I don't know, space where you can help to maybe to young and queer artists or whatever, queer people who still like maybe under abuse of the parents or don't know how to do this. Maybe you need something like that, like creates. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't think it's like, I don't know. I think that's sometimes where I get frustrated is I don't know how I can help. And I want to help, but it feels like such a big thing that without something like that, what are we going to do? And I think that's like, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with a big thing though. Because there's obviously like, you know, cis heteronormative bands and there's queer bands and they can come from the same space, and, you know, everybody goes through different struggles. Everyone has different things that are completely valid. I think statistically, or, you know, if we're looking at the nuanced differences between queer artists and sort of straight heteronormative artists, a lot of queer kids tend to, you know, not have great relationships with family and parents and aren't safe to come out or aren't safe to express their art, or maybe are houseless and have even less resources. Same thing with queer, like trans adults. It's harder for trans people to get jobs. It's harder for people of color to get jobs. So when you have trans people of color, it's like, you know, there's just so many like little nuanced things like that that can really affect queer artists. And then getting labeled as a gimmick and like all they do is talk about being gay, or all they do is talk about being this, or, you know, write a love song, but don't make it about two men, don't make it about two women, make it a, you know, make it a cis couple, make it a hetero couple, so that it's more palatable for the radio and things like that. It's just like, yeah, I don't know, having a space to say whatever the fuck you want, how you want to do it. And I know some places in Toronto are trying to get there, and I know some people that are trying to create things like this. I think it's just one of those things that takes time to make change, and a lot of us are just getting really impatient. I mean, I think I don't know what I would say. I think I think there's the cliche of like, please don't give up. It can get better. There is a place for you. There is a community for you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. I think that's the biggest thing. From my own personal experience and my own feelings, there's nothing wrong with you. You're made the way you're supposed to be made. And if you're in a situation that's unsafe and you're not able to come out, I was in a situation like that. I was able to eventually, as I got older, find my community and find my people. I moved across the country, which helped, but there are so many people out there that are going to think you're beautiful and lovely and see your worth and your value, that need your specific voice. So just please don't give up, and it'll be hard, but if I think that's where I feel so strongly about my music. If my music can help someone, or if there's a show that can help someone, or a book that can help someone, or a celebrity or someone that can give someone hope. It's just like we need it for, I think, the queer youth. And just don't give up. It can and will get better. And you are perfect.
When I filmed the Monsterosa vocal player, she was so funny. She started talking like, I don't know what to say. I'm just so gay. I'm gay. I'm so gay. I'm extremely gay. So fucking.
That sounds like her.
I just was almost dying.
Oh, she's the best. That sounds like her. She's like, I don't know. I'm just gay. I just like kissing girls. I'm like, you should kiss girls. That's so good. Yeah, she's great.
Thank you. It was really interesting for me.
Thank you. No, that was very interesting for me too.